everybody, it is Dean Z, and I am speaking to you from room 132 in Hudgens Hall, which I think is the first time we've been here. It's where I had race in the law, criminal law, something else too, I think. Memories fade, sadly. Anywho, today I want to talk about yield protection, and I'm pretty excited to talk about this. One, because it's just a perennial topic of interest among applicants, and two, because multiple watchers asked me to address this topic, so that makes me feel like I'm answering a real need, which is thrilling for me. So thanks as always for your comments and questions, and as you can see, we try to be as responsive as possible. Okay, so let us start with breaking down the term yield protection. What does it even mean? Yield is the percentage of people who accept a school's offer. So if a school makes 100 offers and 10 people accept, the yield is 10%. If you make 100 offers and 80 people accept, then you're Yale Law School, but then your yield is 80%. So a school would rather have a high yield than a low yield, and it occurs to me as I say that isn't self-evident. So I'm going to talk about that in a second too. But then let's turn to the term protection. So what does it mean to protect your yield? And it would mean to do what you can to keep the number high, and to do that, you would not admit people who you think will not come. So that's what yield protection is really getting at. A school's decision not to admit someone, not because that person isn't qualified, but because the school thinks we don't have a shot of enrolling them. So first I'll say, in the admissions biz, we don't use that term. Like no one goes around saying, I don't think we should admit that person because we need to protect our yield. It's a term that is mostly used by applicants discussing the process, and I think ironically sometimes by admissions officers. We like to be like yield protect in our funny little inside humor. But it is a concept that I think is, even though the admissions officers don't really use the terminology, I do think it's a concept that is in people's minds when you're making decisions. But I think let's talk a little bit too about why it is spoken of on Reddit and elsewhere with, an aggrieved tone. And it is the idea, I think, that here's somebody who is better than, based on the metrics, better than what this school in question might typically enroll. If you're talking about Michigan, we've got a median LSAT of 171 and a median GPA of 3.85. So if someone applies with a 175 and a 3.9, they are above our medians on both numbers. And I think in the mind of that applicant often, they are an auto-admit, to use another term from Reddit, that they are shoo-in, that they are gonna get admitted. And that doesn't always happen. And then when that doesn't happen, the applicant might feel, I have been not admitted for terrible reasons because they just didn't think they could enroll me, and that's not fair. To that, I would say, it's complicated. So let's return, before I get into this anymore, let's talk about why does a school want its yield to be high? Every time we admit someone, that's work, right? So every admitted student is someone we have to interact with, and I'm making it sound like it's a burden, and it's not, but it's just as a practical matter, like you have to send them a certain amount of email, you have to expect them to be reaching out with questions, you have to be communicating with them about financial aid, you have to be, sometimes you'll be connecting them with current students or faculty, so each person that you admit carries a certain weight. So if you have to admit 2,000 people to make your class of 300, that's more work than if you have to admit 1,000 people for your class of 300, or better yet, 600 to make your class of 300. Because if you have 600, you can really know each one of them much better, and you can be more precise in your recruiting work, and perhaps paradoxically, you get a higher yield. More people accept because you're doing a better job at recruiting. If you have 2,000 people, it's too much to manage well, and so you're not doing as good a job with each one of those people. So that's the very practical reason why schools like to have a good yield. It is also part of the rankings formula. Although now the current version of U.S. News rankings, anyway, it's a very tiny part, so I don't know that will be motivating anybody. But in the past, it was larger and it might have motivated people. So that's a less attractive reason why people might have cared about their yield. But fundamentally, and now I'm going to say something controversial. I think first of all, I think the general understanding of yield protection is overblown. And second of all, I think even if it isn't overblown, it's nothing to actually complain about. That's the controversial hot take. Why is it overblown? Because first of all, there's lots of reasons why a school might not admit people whose numbers are at or above their medians. It is not. It is a holistic process, very truly holistic, right? We don't just say, like, here's the cutoff, everybody with these numbers and up is in. And it's not just that people might be, really unhinged or something. There's lots of good reasons that are not that dramatic why I don't admit certain people who happen to have higher numbers. They just don't speak to me. They just don't seem, or they might just not seem like Michigan people. Like, it's very common that I see people who are very smart seeming, but from what I can tell, they just don't seem like they fit here. They're maybe more solitary learners, or more sort of hard-charging, competitive types. And there's lots of different reasons. It doesn't mean they're bad people or that they really messed up their application. They just aren't right for me. And every school does a similar calculus. Everybody has different people that they are looking for that they feel like fit their school's culture. I don't think anybody would say that there is anything wrong with that. And I don't think that's yield protection. That's just like picking your class, right? So I think the people who don't get in with high numbers, who immediately say that's yield protection, are being unreasonable and unfair. But what if it is that I look at this person and I think, they seem good, I like them, but they've got a 177 and a 4.0, and I don't think I'm going to get them. So I'm just going to move on to this other person with a 172 and a 3.92, and I think I'm going to get that person, and I'm going to admit that person instead. Actually, to be clear, I should clarify, it's never like you're balancing one person against another, but let's think of this globally, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I admit lots of people with 177 and 4.0s, and the reason I might not admit one is because it's like a balance, right? I know I'm going to have to work harder to enroll someone with certain numbers, because I know that certain other schools are going to admit that person, and that I typically lose to those schools when people are choosing between Michigan and Yale. Here's a shocking revelation. Most people choose Yale. When people are choosing between Michigan and Harvard, most people are choosing Harvard. So I might admit somebody with a 177 and a 4.0 if I think, I really like this person a lot, and I am gonna do everything I can to get them, and I think they're a good fit here, and I think we have a lot to offer them. I just don't see any reason why that is problematic. And I think this comes down to the fundamental disagreement that admissions officers may have with applicants in the way we view your files, which is applicants are viewing this as, I have put forward an application that is worthy, and therefore I deserve to get in. I am entitled to be admitted. And the fact is, that's not how admissions officers think about it. We are thinking about our institution and what's good for our institution. We're not thinking about it as, you have earned a spot in the class. And I think that thinking is just misguided and wrong-headed, and also sort of unattractive in this sense. If you're this Mr. 177 4.0 and you get into Harvard and you don't get into Michigan, and you would have chosen Harvard over Michigan if you had gotten into Michigan, what the heck do you care? that you didn't get into Michigan. Like, don't be mean-spirited about this. Don't be selfish, right? This is not an exercise where schools are trying to give you, the applicant, the biggest number of wins or admittances that you can compile, right? Alternatively, if you're this 177 4.0 who got into Harvard and didn't get into Michigan, and you really would have chosen Michigan over Harvard, well, that stinks for you. But there are ways, to address this. Writing an essay about why you want Michigan in particular with details, that's helpful. Writing any kind of optional essay showing your interest and showing your fit is helpful. I mean, I don't really hear from people. I feel like we do a pretty good job of this. I don't really hear from people who say, who I maybe someone like this I would always waitlist as opposed to deny, because there's someone who I would be interested in admitting, but make the choice not to. I don't hear back from people like, I am into Harvard, but my dream is Michigan. And again, I think it's because we're pretty good at figuring out the people who are great fits here, who we are going to have a chance of showing them how great Michigan is for them. So yeah, that would be the one real danger, I think, of ever thinking about whether or not you're likely to enroll someone. But I think at least in the aggregate, that this is not an actual problem. All of which is to say, I do think yield protection exists. I think as a concept, I think that some schools are perhaps more, perhaps they lack the confidence that I feel about, like, I think I can enroll somebody with great numbers if I really like them. And maybe they, by some objective measure, overuse this tool of choosing people that they think will enroll and taking guesses on that. But I don't think it's a huge part of the process anywhere. I think the much more common explanation is this person just didn't seem like the person we wanted to admit. And I don't think students should complain about it. Applicants should complain about it. Because again, that complaining reflects your sense of entitlement to be admitted, which is not an entitlement that, in my view, actually exists. All right, I hope that was useful to people. I expect to get pushback. I'm excited about that. I love a little controversy. But please, as always, let us know your questions and comments either below or by email to law.jd.admissions@umich.edu. Thanks as always to Dustin, and thanks for getting us a room that's not the room that we've been in 1,000 times, Dustin. And wherever you go blue.